Okay, great. All right, good afternoon. It's just about a few minutes after midday. How are you all going? So let's just wake ourselves up for this exciting session that we're going to have. I know some of us were wilting and have your tea, but you have water there. And if you take a sip of water, you're going to be great. We have an amazing lady who is going to be sharing with us this lunch armchair session. She is Dr. Cody Pale. Are you seeing them, Cody?
I'm only seeing you right now.
Okay, Patrick is still on. We're seeing him there. So Dr. Cody Page is the director of the space at the Media Lab, a team of 50 plus students, faculty and staff, building and flying advanced technology for space exploration. Students, tune in. The initiative focuses on helping students take their research into space. The pipeline developed to achieve this works with students from across the Media Lab and the MIT community to prototype space-related research in the lab, fly and test them in microgravity on parabolic and suborbital flights, and finally, to take them to the International Space Station or onto the moon. Cody fosters relationships between the initiative, MIT, and space industry partners to forge a path for students to achieve spaceflight for their research. The interdisciplinary projects combine science, engineering, art, and design, all focusing on developing the artifacts for life in space. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together. Not a thank you for rousing applause for Dr. Cody Page. Cody, over to you.
Thank you. That was a great introduction of the Space Exploration Initiative. I guess instead of telling you more about the initiative just yet, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. So I did my PhD at MIT. I finished it just about a year ago now. And that was actually in aeronautical and astronautical engineering. And my focus was mostly on developing virtual reality for lunar surface exploration. But I did some of my work on radiation protection materials for space as well, and thinking about how we could integrate them into spacesuits. So that was my PhD work. I also have a background in geology. I studied at Dalhousie University in Canada. And my focus there was using cosmic rays to give us the age of quartz. So basically similar to how we do carbon dating with biomaterials, I was using carbon to test the age of rocks. Before that, I worked in industry for a little while. I was in aircraft design. I did a master's in aerospace engineering, focusing on aircraft design. And so I worked in that industry for a little bit. And my original background, so my bachelor was in engineering physics. So really a little bit more on the nuclear engineering side. So very, very diverse background and kind of a lot of different areas that I've touched on. And now working at the Media Lab, I get to work with all sorts of different people. It was mentioned that we work with anywhere from art projects to engineering projects, and it's true, we try and bring all of life into space with us. So we've had projects that we've worked on that are thinking about culinary experience in space. We've had musical instruments, and then we've had more traditional projects like looking at propulsion in space. So really a broad range of projects, and it's one of my favorite things because we get to work with all types of people, which is fantastic. So that's about me. I don't know if you had questions for me, or if you wanted me to go into more detail about the Space Exploration Initiative and some of the projects we do.
If you could tell us a little bit more about your project and how the students are involved, and then the students will be asking you some questions. Good.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, no problem. So the Space Exploration Initiative, like you mentioned, we do this in a phased program. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about how those phases work and how we get students involved in this program. So the first phase we call the Earth-based testing phase. So this is where we have development that's more traditional, kind of what you think about for the development of space technologies, where we work in a lab, we test in the lab, we do prototyping. And then we actually also we've just started in the last couple years, we do expeditions. So our expeditions go to the Arctic. We've also been to the Canary Islands. We select locations that are analogous to space environments. And this is so that we can test the technologies, the experiments, the knowledge that we have, that we can test it here on Earth first in very extreme environments or very remote environments, and places that are going to reflect what we're going to see in space. So the first expedition that the Space Exploration Initiative did was actually one that I got to be a part of, and we went to Svalbard, which is an archipelago. It's between Norway and Greenland, and it's in the Arctic, but it is relatively accessible. And so we were able to go to Svalbard and bring our experiments to this very remote place, and test them, not just for the extreme environment, but we also got to test out the operations. So to look at how we were going to collect data, what it meant to be in a remote place. There's obviously no hardware stores that you can run to that are really easily accessible where you can fix these things. So you had to think about bringing all of the secondary equipment with you. How would you deal with things breaking down? So really thinking about the full operation of what a mission might look like, so that you could foresee any issues that you might have with your technology. On that expedition, I actually brought, so that was part of my PhD research. So I brought a off-the-shelf camera that takes LiDAR and RGB imagery, so that we can put that together and build virtual environments. And the research I was doing there was actually looking at the geology in Svalbard, because it has very interesting water indicating features that we might also find on Mars. So we were collecting data there for these water indicating features, which I then took back and put into virtual reality to test, to make sure that what we expected would happen, that VR would be a beneficial tool that we could use for exploration. I wanted to test that in a lab environment. So I had this setup that was fantastic from the Arctic. We also had other experiments that were on that expedition. One was looking at the cultural implications of living in a very remote environment. So working with the community that lived there, and exploring what that might relate to on a future Mars mission. So for people who maybe have been living on Mars for 200 years, and now we're thinking about what the culture looks like in that distant future. We had a secondary Svalbard mission that went the following year, and that one had a lot more focus on the environment. So we had somebody who's working with National Geographic went on that expedition, and was testing out microphones that could be used in areas with a lot of wind. Wind can be very difficult for recording sound. So they were testing out equipment in the field with lots of wind and seeing if they could record these very unique bird sounds while they were there. And then we also had somebody who was recording migratory patterns of those same birds. So we tried to have all the different projects that go on these expeditions, we try to tie them to each other so that they can work together. Our third expedition was to the Canary Islands. So we went to Lanzarote and tested, sorry, you had a question?
No, go ahead. After you've told us about the third expedition, I will ask you how the students selected. Do they volunteer or they're handpicked? Because we also have some professors in the room.
Fantastic. Okay.
Today.
Yeah. And hopefully this can be something that you could build out at your universities as well. We would love for this to be a something that was more broad. So the third expedition was looking at lava tubes. There are lunar lava tubes, we expect. So, and I think that was recently in the news about the lunar lava tubes. So we took that same 3D camera to these lava tubes and developed a 3D virtual digital twin of this fantastic lava tube that's in Lanzarote. So now I can come back and answer your question about the students. So the way that we select the students, and actually I'll quickly run through the other two phases because that'll kind of tie everything together for how we do this student selection. So I won't go into as much detail. So phase 2 is the parabolic flights, like you mentioned. So those are the Vomit Comet, if you've heard of that, where they do these big parabolas, and we get to experience about 20 to 30 seconds of microgravity, lunar gravity, or Martian gravity. And that's actually taught as a class. And so students go through a full class where they develop their experiments, and it can be tied to their research or not. And then, so that's in the fall semester. And then in the spring semester, we take them on the parabolic flight to actually collect real data on their experiments. And then the third phase is actually in space. So we've had experiments go to the International Space Station. And then we have our first lunar mission on IM-2, which is Eclipse mission, going at the end of the year. So am I missing are you speaking to me, or should I go into
Okay, thank you. The professor. We're going to the
No.
floor for questions. No, Cody. You.
I have a question to start with.
Claire, your.
I have a question to start with.
Okay.
Are you hearing me? Yes.
Yes.
Is she hearing me? Okay. I have a question to start with. So thank you so much, Dr. Cody Page, for joining us. I'm delighted you're here. So what we're trying to do with Africa is to create an analog research program. This is part of the Oaseas Ungana output. It's an actual physical facility or network of physical facilities. Won't just be one. Certainly want to do one in East Africa, in Kenya, and one in Ghana as a starting point. But we anticipate a network of people doing different kinds of experiments. And so we're really very much interested in hearing about the ability to do digital twins as a starting point, because I think many times we are kind of flummoxed here in Africa in the context of, oh, where we're getting the money from to build a big research lab, right? And so we have to think about it very differently. And a first road step. So could you explain a bit more about how you get the students to first focus on building a simulation model of what it is they'll be doing in real life as a starting point for how we might start? And also, if you have had any kind of a online experience where the students actually do themselves, like live online, if you will, for a couple of times to kind of test out their model before they do the physical thing in the actual experiment?
Great question. So I think the analog aspect of what you're talking about is something that is, you don't need big facilities. You don't have to have kind of the big, like a lot of people, I think when they hear the word analog, they think of doing analog missions as in having like the analog astronauts stay in a habitat and having them have to stay there for a month and having these big facilities to accommodate that. But really, I think the most valuable science actually comes out of the environment itself. And especially in Africa, when you can select locations that are reflective of the space environment. So because of my geology background, I really focus on the geology, but of course you could look at extremophiles and how they might survive in extreme environments and think of those different aspects. And then you actually don't need the facilities. All you need to do is go and visit those locations and think about the science there in terms of space, which is exactly what we did in Svalbard and then the Canary Islands. We really, I mean, we stayed in houses there. We weren't staying in big facilities, and we just brought the equipment with us. And then the second question about digital twins is, so that was really my focus on my PhD work, and we are using, the part of the research was to use low cost technology so that this could be something that students could do and something that could be sent on every CLIPS mission. So we actually use the Microsoft Azure Connect, which is, I think, no longer in production, but even in the Canary Islands, we actually used an iPhone. So these are not, you know, technologies that have been developed over decades. This is not new technology that was very expensive to develop. This is just off the shelf, what we're taking into the field. And the iPhone actually worked really, really well in the lava tube, of course, because it's dark. So the LiDAR worked really well on that. And we were able to build that digital twin. We've also been using drones, which are in the still not the expensive drones, so in the couple of $1,000 range rather than the tens of $1,000 range. Even the smaller drones are capable of taking enough photography to do photogrammetry with, to build those digital twins. So definitely take advantage of all of the great kind of low-cost technologies. You can still do fantastic digital twins with that. And then how, if we've had any students who have worked in those digital twin environments. So this, when I was doing my PhD research, this was really kind of the beginning of this development that we were doing. So I did testing of having students do exploration in that virtual environment, but it was only about like 2 to 3 hours at a time. We had another student who used the same environment to do mission planning, and that was about 4 hours. So we've never had somebody spend a really long time in there, like, you know, do a full week of working in these remote environments or in this digital twin environment. But we were doing testing to see if it was a possibility to do work in the digital twin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cody Page. We have some professors in the room and students. We would like to take maybe 1 or 2 questions, very brief questions, because we have astronaut Sarah online waiting.
Fantastic.
For this session. Who is going to ask the first question? Dean? Students? Wow. No questions?
Everybody's
All right.
excited for the astronauts, Sarah.
Cody, will you be able to stay on
Yeah.
for the next, because maybe questions will emerge.
Yes, yes, of course.
Probably are thinking about it. Thank you so very much. This was very enlightening. I
Thank you.
have a 9-year-old grandson who is always drawing the planets, and he can tell you so much about space. I know at some point he is going to be doing a lot of amazing things like what you have done.
That's so
You can
good.
actually see the seeds already. Thank you so very much. Can you give her a round of applause, please? I think that was very enlightening. Thank you. I hope you're hearing the applause.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All right, great. Our next person who is going to be interacting with us is astronaut Sarah Sabri. Did I pronounce that correctly, Sarah?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Awesome. She's an astronaut. She's an engineer. She is a speaker. and she is an entrepreneur. I think it's important that we all listen very carefully to her because, you know, it's when we see people doing things that the seeds are planted in our minds, in our hearts, and in our spirits as to what's possible for us. A little bit of background on Sarah Sabri. Her journey is a very unconventional one. Her broad interests have continuously pushed her to explore beyond her comfort zone, going all in on things that mattered. Her wide range of experiences span from mechatronics and computational fluid dynamics to stem cell development for neurodegenerative diseases, robotic surgery, and bioastronautics. Outside of her work, and this is the part of it that I really love because she's a total person. Outside of work, Sabri is very passionate about physical well-being, and she spent time as a yoga instructor and CrossFit coach in Egypt. She is Egyptian and Lebanese. Some of her other hobbies include MMA, and you're going to tell us what MMA is, Sabri, traveling, scuba diving, marine conservation, flying, and guess what? Baking. Wow. She is the first African-American, no, I would not, she's not African-American. She is the first astronaut from her hemisphere that has flown. On August 4, 2020, she launched to space on Blue Origin's new Shepard rocket NS-22 and became the first Egyptian astronaut and the first African woman and first Arab woman to reach space. She was selected by Space for Humanity to go on a mission to experience the overview effect and bring that back to Earth. Let us put our hands together to welcome astronaut Sarah Sabri. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much for such a kind introduction. Thank you, really. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much, Cody, for your presentation. It was so enlightening to hear about it. And I'd love to speak, also to chat about it later on in private as well. It was really, really interesting to hear about it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. And I'm really excited to be speaking to you. I wish I could be there in person. I'd love to come visit Ghana one day. So I'd love to be able to make it in person, hopefully next year or in Kenya. So yeah, I'm really excited to speak to you all. And yeah, I mean, I think you've pretty much covered a lot in the introduction, but yeah, my journey was very unconventional. So I grew up in Egypt and I've always lived here in the region. I was born in Saudi. My mom is Lebanese. So I've always, you know, I never really saw anything around me that I wanted to be. And whenever someone would ask what I wanted to be, I always thought I wanted to be an inventor. I wanted to kind of do something that wasn't available around me. And I used to be really, I used to be a dreamer. And I kind of always envisioned something that just, you know, I couldn't really see around me. And when I wanted to pursue engineering, I was told that it would be, specifically mechatronics, I was told that it would be too difficult for someone like me. When if I was a boy, I would not have been told that. And when I wanted to do biomedical engineering, I was told that I wouldn't have any opportunities in my country. And then when I was interested in the space field, I was told that I was wasting my time. Because when you grew up in a place where you don't have really rocket launches, we don't have astronauts from our side of the world, we're always looking at ourselves internally, and also, you know, we always think that it's just not for us, and you're always told that it's not for you. So you're always told that don't dream about that. And a lot of it is well-intentioned as well, because, you know, sometimes people around you want you to be more realistic, to do something that's available around you, because they don't want you to go through the whole disappointments and rejections. But I always believed that there was just so much more. And my interest in space, it didn't really start from, at a young age where I saw a movie or something and I was inspired by it and I wanted to become an astronaut. It really wasn't that at all. It was more, I always wanted to do things because I found them interesting. And for me, I've always been an engineer. It was always something that I've been interested in. When I was young, I used to break up toys and kind of try to put them back together. It was always interesting for me to learn how things worked. And that's how I moved from mechanical engineering to understanding how things worked around us, to trying to understand the human body. And I did my master's in biomedical engineering in Italy. And then I worked in stem cells for a little bit, because again, it was all about how do you fix problems in the human body using different methods and different techniques and different innovations. And I kind of moved away from stem cells after a little while because I missed my engineering skills. That didn't really challenge me as much as I would have liked. And that's how I moved into robotic surgery, which challenged me a little bit too much. And I did that for a little while as well. It was really, really interesting. I learned so much of, I had to learn a lot of programming, and it was really, really difficult because logic reasoning is not something that's available. And it taught me so much about the real world too, because when you work on something that's just that's very niche and it's very specific and there isn't a lot of content, it's not like Python, or it's not like a lot of the languages that exist now where you can go on a library and kind of like help yourself with other content that's already there. I had to reach out to people who wrote papers in the 90s. You had to really think creatively on how to solve the problem that you had to work on. And that taught me so much about, just the whole research world in reality. And I had to speak to surgeons by myself. So I had to like really go out and try to solve the problem that I had at hand. And I've continued to apply the same thing throughout my whole career. And that kind of motivated me to, when I was interested in space field, to handle things in the same way. So I think that was a huge lesson learned for me, where even though the resources were not available to me at the time, not in my university and not in whatever I could find online, because it was just so difficult to find. It's just about reaching out to people, and this kind of the skill of networking and the skill of, just doing it despite not being able to, it kind of helped me when I was interested in the space field, and where I started reaching out to people from the community, and trying to really do some research independently. And then I discovered that if you're not part of a specific, if you're not from the West, it's really difficult to get access to that data. So meaning if you're not, I couldn't apply to jobs in the US, and I couldn't apply to jobs in Europe, just because, there are laws that make it impossible for you to hire a foreign national. And I started working in research independently with a lot of researchers around the world. And then I founded a company. I founded Deep Space Initiative, which is a nonprofit in the US. It's based in the US. And my partner in this company, she used to be a chief scientist at NASA for 14 years. We have a lot of people that are incredible in the company, that are really also motivated in really promoting international collaboration within the industry, and really helping increase access to the space field for everyone around the world. And that's what we do at DSI, and that's what I've continuously been doing throughout my career as well. And yeah, and then I applied to this program called Space for Humanity a few years ago, and I got selected out of thousands of applicants from all over the world to go to space. And the mission's purpose is to experience the overview effect and try to analyze that. So currently we have a data set of just about 2 people. So we need a lot more people to really try to understand what's, and it's a bit of a controlled, it's not really controlled, but it's really, you're trying to collect that data in a way that's as best as you can. But try to understand how seeing Earth from space changes you and your brain. So I was the second citizen astronaut, and we're still kind of working on increasing the citizen astronaut program. We're getting more people involved, and we're trying to send more people to space. And yeah, so since then I've been traveling, doing a lot of public speaking. I'm currently doing my PhD as well in aerospace. and working in research related to spacesuits to try to use my background in mechatronics and biomedical engineering, because the spacesuit is a very, very unique it's basically a small spacecraft that touches the human body. And with my background, I think it just made sense for me to be working on this specific topic. But I'm also interested in a lot of different ones related to space policy and law, and just using science science diplomacy. That's something that I've been, ever since my space flight, I've been kind of thrown into this whole world where you had to learn a new language, basically. And it's been a wonderful journey. It's been exciting. And yeah, I think I'm happy to take any questions or anything at all. I think you're muted, sorry.
Thais, are you hearing me, Sarah? Yeah. What you've just shared with us ties in so beautifully with a conversation we were having yesterday about the youngsters in the schools, and the opportunities might not be there for them when they graduate. And rather than sitting down and joining, somebody says, the unemployment club of Ghana, that they are able to identify what are the opportunities and the possibilities. As a coach myself, one of the keys I find to my successful clients is having a clear vision of what they want their life to be. They might not know the exact path, and they might not know the exact career that's going to take them there, but they are very clear in their mind what they like their life to be. And so I would like to ask those of you who are in the audience, what are your main takeaways from Sarah's presentation that you can actually use to help yourself, your children, your grandchildren, your students, and yourselves? Anybody? Nobody? Professors? Sure.
I think a few people
Thank
are
you very
raising their
much.
hands here.
Introduce
Yes.
yourself, please.
My name is Jude Bayo. I'm the Dean of the School of Physical Sciences, CK University of Technology and Applied Sciences, Nabongo. Just want to know about working beyond your comfort zone. What exactly would you describe as some of the issues that came up in working beyond your comfort zone? And how can you encourage people within our area, coming from backgrounds in Ghana, who aspire to be like you? What are the trends that they should follow to be able to make it? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think that's a really good one. And I think everyone's journey is a little bit different, but it matters so much to believe in what you do a lot. And I think that kind of pushes you through the difficult moments where it feels impossible, where you're facing a lot of rejections, because, you know, trying to do something that hasn't been done before, that it's just not the easy path. You know, that's not something that's there's no specific thing that you could do, and especially with the space field, because there's so much going on now, and it's so rapid, the amount of things that are going on. So it's sometimes difficult to really be up to date with everything that's going on and try to kind of figure out where you fit. And I think, first of all, kind of finding your own way, and being also just so sure about what you want to do and why you want to do it. And I think it's so important to love what you do. And it's important to not do it for a specific reason that you're trying to work towards at the very, very end, because the journey is all of it. And I know it sounds very cheesy and cliche, but what you're currently doing day by day. And I was reading this book one time, and the author was talking about how, like, in leadership and what he was doing, he always envisions his life as a museum. And he always envisioned, like, the way he lives his life is when you're walking through that museum at the end of your life and you're looking at screenshots of pictures of moments of your life that are significant or not, you know, it could be just like a random day and you have just a screenshot of it just on the hallways, on the both the walls. And what does it look like? And are you happy with it or not? So when you reach the end of the hall, sure, the end of the hall is great, it's amazing, and has a lot of different things, but what would you want your hallway to look like? And I think I keep that in mind a lot of the time because you can really get so caught up with the end goal and not be happy or be okay with everything that's going on currently. And I think that takes away from the whole experience too. And the reasoning behind it too, like why you're doing what you're doing. Are you very much convinced with all of this? Because you're going to need this conviction to convince others. And especially in Africa and different countries around Africa, we need to very much convince older generations for why we need to be investing in this new field. How is it really benefiting life on Earth? How is it, and specifically in how in which ways? So we need to be able to provide these examples. We need to provide these technologies. We need to really be communicating with all of these different entities internationally. So you have to have that conviction yourself to be able to convince others. So training with just being able to communicate your thoughts, communicating with others about it, really trying to have an open mind and receptive to all of these different ideas, and also then putting all of these puzzle pieces together. And I think that's what Africa needs the most. And that's really challenging. And it's not something that's comfortable because you're not really trained to do that. In school, we're not trained to do that. We're trained to learn specific things and to solve them in one way or another. So, but real life is not really like that. You're not given a textbook and asked to learn from it. You have to actually go and look things up and ask here and there and actually do some studies yourself and really do some financial analysis to be able to understand if that's beneficial or not for the country economically, because yes, it does matter if it's beneficial or not economically for the country. And then learning new skills that are just might not be from your background. So for example, for me, when I was working in robotic surgery, I had to learn a new programming language that was just honestly ridiculously and unnecessarily hard. You know, logic reasoning is not something that you use every day, and it's not something that a lot of people use. And I had to use it because it had to be integrated with machine learning and later on. But so I believed it was necessary to be done. And I went ahead, and I'm not a computer engineer. I have a background in mechatronics, sure. So I have a little bit of programming experience, but just not at this level at all. So going and being convinced with the idea that it's necessary, that it's beneficial, and then going and really trying to learn about it, it kind of pushes you through the moments where you just want to give up, and you're just kind of, you don't like, when it's really, really hard, when you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you'll need this conviction to help support you and help push you forward. So I think I hope that makes sense. I know I kind of like went a little bit over the different points, but I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Sarah. I am inspired. I'm inspired to continue to live my dreams. Dr. Nelson, are you inspired to push forward knowing that it can be done? Is there anybody else who is as inspired as I am? Let me see your hand. 1, 2. Ooh, everybody's hand is up. Sarah, they're inspired by your story. Any questions?
Hi, joining from online. I do have a simple question for Sarah. So having grown up in Ghana as well, and now a space systems engineer working in Europe, I can definitely relate to the challenges that you highlighted. So I would just like to know, in your own opinion or perspective, what can the government, or which areas should the government or agencies focus on helping these students, or helping my fellow colleagues to achieve or realize their dreams of eventually end up in the same sector? What key areas do you believe the government should focus or invest in, for example?
I think each government is a little bit different. And I think we have to, with politics, it gets a little bit complicated, but it's really interesting, and I love talking about these things. So it's not something that you know, I shy away from at all. But with politics and with countries and with, you know, with the priorities the countries has, we need to work. And similar to business, let's say, okay, I'm going to try to talk about it in a better way. So in business, let's say, it has to always be a win-win situation. So similarly, whenever we're talking about needing aid from the government, it has to be a win-win situation for them too. So we have to be working towards you know, the big picture is helping humanity. The big picture is becoming multiplanetary. The big picture is having better international collaboration and having equity amongst all countries, right? So that's the big picture. We have two main problems in the world, and I think a lot of things fall under them, but two big umbrellas, it's oppression and climate. So, and you can't solve one or the other without the other one. So if we take these, and a lot of things fall under each one, and then this one, a lot of things fall under each one, and we have to work on both, and you can't just pick and choose the one of the two. So if your goal is to work on these, right? And the government's goals is to do A, B, C, D, E, and that doesn't really target these. Well, how do you connect these two? How do you benefit and work towards, you know, help the agenda of the government and really give help give it, you know, a seat at the table when making decisions internationally? How do you allow it to help the economy within the whole country? How do you help it benefit all of the other sectors in the country with agriculture, with so many different fields? You know, space can really help with a lot of that. So it's just about communicating to governments how that can be it, and really getting the data to support that. So you can really get the data on how economically having more space presence, not only in person, like not having people in space only, but having a better space ecosystem within the country. How do we, if the country has a satellite that is, so it doesn't really, it's not dependent on another country to get data on weather conditions, or on just the how agriculture is doing in different areas around your country, then how do you get that data? There's a lot of studies that need to be done to see how does it benefit the country economically, and then you start that conversation with the different political leaders and you know, leaders in the country to really push and add that into their agenda. So with policy, it's really difficult because in engineering, it's so easy to say this is the right answer and that's it. You can have an elegant answer, an elegant method of reaching your solution, or it could be just kind of like a sloppy, lazy way to get to that solution. But with politics, it's very different. And with really trying to influence policy, it has to be a win-win situation. It has to be beneficial for the government. And once you prove that it's beneficial for the government, then you'll receive their aid. So they need to just be aware of that. So I feel like a lot of the different departments need to be communicating more. So in Ghana, so I'd be more than happy to kind of try to understand more what's happening. What I would do, let's say if I was from Ghana and I would wanted to understand, and that's kind of what I try to do also in different countries too, is I would try to understand, so does the country have a national space policy? What's written in the national space policy? And then number two, what are the biggest sectors influencing the economy right now? What are the biggest problems in the country right now? Where does space tie in? Which type of space technology would tie into that? And then you kind of do a feasibility study, kind of try to understand how it can actually help economically. And then you find the people that are actually in positions and try to speak to them. And just opening up that line of communication and just really trying to prove that, then you'll find the aid, then you'll have the government maybe hopefully try to absorb some of the risk, and then you can build a space ecosystem to try to, you know, integrate more startups, more businesses that are related to that, and then you'll have better presence throughout the country. So it doesn't really happen really quickly, but it's just about building that the base. And in order to build that base, you have to have communication, and that's would be my advice.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. The good thing is that these countries, almost all of these countries, have a 30-year, a 40-year vision. And within that vision, there are a number of areas that if we look closely, we can find a space for ourselves to carve out. It's high-level vision, but within that, the education, the space, the science and technology, you can find a space to find your place. Sarah, there is one other question online that we would like to take. That will be our final question for the session.
Yeah, sure. Good. Can you hear me? Hello, everybody.
Yes,
Yeah,
we can
thank
hear
you
you.
so much. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your speech. You really, I'm humbled, and I, you cannot see me right now, but you are just narrated my mind. So that's something that I used to say to everybody every day here in Benin, where I'm based. So my name is Thierry Marshall Changole from Benin Republic. I'm CEO and founder at Cosmolab Hub, and we design edutainment contents such as comic book, video game, around aerospace in order to engage and develop softwares related to climate change and sustainability as well. So listening to you, a question came to my mind because I have a lot of friends. I've been previously national point of contact for SGAC, Space Generation Advisory Council, and I know a lot of us were not based in Africa, where they were a national point of contact, even if the regional coordinators were not in Africa. But this is a path. I am seeing you during your journey, a time where you didn't have opportunity to go out of the continent, where you do you think that you would be be at that level today? And asking that question, I'm looking at people who are talented, have a genius, and can do even more than us, but don't have that opportunity to manifest that geniuses, that talented in the country because lack of a lot of resources and so on and so forth. So what can we do? What can we do for them? What can we do? Because we need it. We cannot leave a continent. And there is a, how do I call it in French? In French, they say pillage. But there is some things there. When you leave a continent and go to for a year, it's difficult to come back. It's difficult to come back because people make a lot of money, a lot of things, and so on and so forth. So in terms of knowledge transfer as well, what do you think can do to share knowledge, motivate, and create that ecosystem here as well in Africa? And where
You already answered your question. But Sarah, do you have anything to add to what Thierry had just said?
I think it's a really important topic. So I think brain drain is one of the biggest problems that countries are facing, around the continent. And it's really important to, well, what we have to do, and I think I faced the same problem too, and I think in terms of lack of resources, there's a lot of available, as long as you have internet and just a form of communicating with different people. So at DSI, we do that. So provide research opportunities and educational material to people from all over the world, and it's free. And so we have a lot of people from around the continent and the region and from just all over the world. We have about 60 nationalities working on research together with other people who are a lot more experienced, with mentors from all over the world. So just, I think, you don't really need a lot of resources to actually start your journey and do research in the field. As long as you have just internet and a computer, you can actually do something. And then in terms of if the person wants to leave the country, definitely it's always something that people are looking to do. And I've done that too, like it's definitely better for you personally if you want to, look for opportunities. So there are a lot of fellowships and scholarships and a lot of different opportunities that exist. And there's a lot that you could do also with the government in terms of, them providing the resources for you to get that knowledge and then bring it back to your country. So there's a lot of programs like that. I'm not sure about like the specific names in Ghana specifically, but I know of the ones that are in Egypt and a lot of different countries. But definitely, I think just collaborating online, what we have now and what we've learned since COVID is that we can really do so much online together. So I think just using that resource, there's so much that can be done. And also from your experience too, you've seen how it is with SGAC and with different volunteer organizations. You can really do a lot. You can really have influence. You can educate Congress. You can talk about this, about that. You can really collaborate on different projects. So there's so much that could be done before you take that next step. And then hopefully what can happen is once you have that first step done of, trying to prepare yourself, because you can't really help the country if you're not prepared yourself yet, right? And that's something that I actually went through myself. I was going through a lot of guilt too after my space flight, and it took me a lot to realize that, well, I have to be equipped with all the tools and all the knowledge necessary and the experience in order to be able to help my country afterwards. So you can't have that before that. So I can't really help someone if my cup is empty, So there's all that realization too, where, and it takes a lot of effort and motivation to really, make that, because it comes with a sacrifice. It's not an easy decision to make, because like you were saying, you can get a lot more compensation if you're abroad, but it takes a lot to be able to want to do that. And it needs to come also, again, from what we were talking about earlier, is that the government needs to be able to support that. So the first step is to have that communication. And then in the meantime, you're working on building that education system. So you build that base of, once these generations grow older, they have those opportunities. And if they don't exist, then these will create these opportunities, but it has to start from the education system. And in the meantime, there needs to be communication. And then in the next generations, they will have those opportunities and be able to create them. And then the people who left will be motivated to come back, because then these opportunities will exist. Or even if they don't exist, they're going to want to create them in the country if there's support from not only government. Like, I know I talk a lot about government, but it's also from the commercial industry, from private entities, from different companies around the continent, the continent and the country, that are doing so much, and there are resources. It's just about kind of deciding where to take them. The African Development Bank is doing so much. Africa 50 has raised a few $1 billion, and they're doing a lot of work on agriculture, on this and this and that. And it's just about kind of just starting with that communication, allocating some of those $1 billion on the specific field, and then allowing it to start with different phases, if you know what I mean. And I'd be happy to talk about this more, later on too, if you'd like, because it's a very important topic and it's really, really interesting.
This conference has brought out a number of ideas, and I think the different conversations we are having and continue to have will answer many of the questions that have come up since yesterday and will come up. So it's my task to thank you, Sarah, and Dr. Cody, for taking the time out. You're really very busy, but you have inspired everybody in this room with your stories. And they say, facts tell, stories sell. So you have sold us with your stories that anything is possible once we can dream it. And as Thoreau said, if we advance confidently in the direction of our dreams, endeavoring to live the life we are imagining, we will pass invisible boundaries and meet with unexpected success in common hours. So I declare a blessing upon you, blessings in abundance as you advance in the direction of your dreams. Thank you so much. Dr. Nelson?
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Dr. Cody, and thank you again, Sarah Sabre. I missed you this year in Arizona, but hopefully I see you in October. I'm at the African Association of Engineering Educators. Hopefully I'll see you in Egypt in October. So give my hand again, please.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Dr. Cody, I'll have to come and visit you in Massachusetts, but don't I do that?
I would love that. You'd be more than welcome. I'll give you the tour. Thank you so much. This was great.
When school opens. Excellent, excellent. All right, so folks, we are, I'm not sure if lunch is over, but we have one speaker who was not able to make it this morning, and he's here. That's David Reinecke from State Department. Could we have the screen? Could we bring up David, please? David, could you turn on your camera and sound so we can see you and bring you, spotlight you? So David, here he is. David Reinecke is a Foreign Service Officer of the State Department, and he is in the office of the State Department that is doing international science, in particular, working on plans for International Lunar Year. So David, you have the floor, and then I probably have a few questions to follow up. We missed you this morning, but I'm glad you're able to make it. So you have the floor.
Claire, can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay, perfect. And thank you so much for accommodating me at this this later time today. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Reinecke. I come from the Office of Space Affairs at the U.S. State Department. And my day job, the thing I work on the most, is outreach and implementation for the Artemis Accords. So trying to build an international community that's interested in issues of cislunar policy and programs. But in my spare time, my copious spare time, I actually don't have too much of it. I also work on this idea of an international lunar year. And that's what I want to speak to you today. And so I really appreciate, Claire, you inviting me here today to talk about an international lunar year. These years are based off of these things called international science years. It's a well-recognized way, often done through the United Nations, to elevate the profile of particular sciences. So we've had international years of astronomy, international years of light. There's going to be an international year of quantum sciences coming up quite soon. And the idea is to do something similar for lunar science and planetary science. So an international lunar year, something that would celebrate and recognize lunar exploration, lunar science, but also the wider cultural history of the moon. And I think something that is important to emphasize, and I think we can all appreciate, is that everyone on Earth, for all of history, has looked up and seen the moon, right? Our kind of closest planetary neighbor. And as such, there's a kind of a dense and wide and vast cultural history and association that we have with the moon that we could celebrate through something like an international year celebrating lunar science. These years can be organized in lots of different ways. Some years in the past have tended to emphasize public outreach and education, bringing in people from a diverse set of backgrounds. Some of these years sometimes try to do coordinated or complicated international collaboration. And I think an international lunar year can probably leverage both of those modalities, right? It can do a little bit of the public outreach and education and also a little bit of coordinating amongst participating countries. The thing that's exciting for me is that if you look forward into the next decade or so, by some accounts, we have 100 missions or more planned to go to the moon from 19 countries plus and 24 commercial companies, right? So this is the greatest time really in history, not since the 1960s, that we've had so much activity in and around the moon. And so there's a lot of opportunity not only to expand, countries participating and interest in moon missions, but to somehow kind of coordinate or pull all these different efforts together in a complete package. There's also a lot of other reasons we could be interested in this. Something that, and I know, Claire, this is why you've invited me here today. I think it's very important that the moon be a place for all, one moon for all. And more importantly, that countries that maybe don't have a near-term plan to go to the moon still have a say or a place at the table, a way to participate and lend their voice to the kind of growing diversity of interest and conversations around the moon. And an international lunar year can do precisely that, right? It doesn't just have to be the handful of countries that are going to go to the moon. It can be everybody who has an interest in the moon and a kind of cultural history and a cultural story to share about the relationship to our closest neighbor. The last thing that I want to emphasize is that there's now a growing community. This isn't just something that I'm advocating for on behalf of the State Department or the US government. There's now a growing community of scientists, civil society organizations, commercial companies, and others that are beginning to organize around this idea of an international lunar year. And I will send you, Claire, an email that you can circulate to the wider group if there's interest in that. To kind of join this nascent effort to coordinate and organize the what we're calling the ILY, right? So it's not just something that I'm giving presentations about. It's actually starting to have this grassroots effort, this kind of groundswell of support. And the idea is to try to push for it by the close of this decade. People have put forward the idea of 2027, for instance, as a time where the international lunar year could happen, or 2028. There's lots of conversations going on right now about when exactly to have that this year in order to maximize the opportunities that could fall under it. So all of which is to say, this isn't just an idea, it's actually beginning to happen. And I would take an opportunity that we have today to really invite anyone who's interested to reach out to me or to Claire or to send an email out to the kind of the wider distribution to begin to get involved, to find ways to connect your particular country or your particular organization's interest in the moon to this wider effort for an international lunar year. So I'll throw it back to you, Claire, if you have any quick questions, and I'm happy to take questions from the wider audience as well.
All right, so we missed a little bit of it, but the central point is that this International Lunar Year is still in its like infancy stage, gestation stage. It doesn't yet exist. We have an opportunity as NGOs, as academic institutions, to be part of, let's say, the formation of what that could look like. What is it we want to accomplish with that International Lunar Year? Certainly, now that I am, David, I'm not sure you know this, but I got elevated. I'm now International Moon Day Ambassador, so you have to start calling me Ambassador. You don't have to call me Excellency, but you know, Washington loves ambassadors, so it's very funny. But anyway, the fact is that we have an opportunity to begin to shape what that looks like. And so as you think about it from both in terms of the engineering perspective of the whole quest to go to the moon, do more research on the moon. We heard earlier the idea of launching a lunar satellite built and designed and built by girls and women coming out of India. All of these things could feed in. So how you think about organizing projects which are trans-university. So we have 4 universities more or less participating in this conference consistently. We have Cape Coast, we have UTAS, we have ANU, and I think we have NUST is going to be here this afternoon, and academics. So it's 5 Ghanaian universities. We have 1 from Cote d'Ivoire. We have 1 from Senegal. And I believe a gentleman from Benin who is online may also be at a university. So you have a network of universities here that even if it's just to form like a conversation group, a working group, what is it that you can begin to think about from an ECOWAS standpoint that, let's say, these countries may begin to say, here's what we would like to see in Senegal, or here's what we'd like to see in Cote d'Ivoire, here's what we'd like to see in Ghana coming to be put into when your governments have to decide, because obviously the UN has to vote on it. Is there an opportunity for you to organize, coming out of this conference, to begin to have a body of NGOs that are really talking to governments in West Africa in particular, and moving in the agenda? Well, my experience from the Kenyan perspective, I haven't really been to South Africa, but they seem to be a little more organized. Kenya has organized very loosely. They don't have many associations that are in one group, but they have a loose network. They have a platform and they share information across the engineering and the astronomers, but they have more than 1 or 2 or 3 astronomy groups, etc. And maybe you also want to take that form, maybe form first a network. It's not formally an organization, but we have to really find a way to organize. So are there any comments or questions about the Lunar Year concept that you are concerned about or just have queries about? Anybody? Or are we good? Questions? You have the mic? No questions?
Claire,
No?
While folks are considering questions, I just want to say I'm very excited to hear the incredible network that you've pulled together for this conference. We're at the stage where we're really going around to try and find organizations and interested groups who want to endorse this idea. So in the United States, for instance, we've had 45 research institutions and universities say that an International Lunar Year would be a great idea. And it would be amazing if we could have a corresponding number of African organizations and universities and research institutes say the same. So you're precisely right. It's still very early days. There's a huge opportunity for people to come in and shape it how they want it, to achieve the goals that they think are important. But we're really at this point where it would just be great to have a groundswell of support from different universities and research institutes from all over the world, putting their stamp on why this idea is important.
So Dr. Mensah, I'm going to put you at the spot. You do have an NGO already. Could you give Dr. Mensah the mic? Just, I know it's the first time you're hearing about it, but given you already have an NGO that's beginning to kind of pull together African academics in space, what are your first thoughts in hearing about the International Lunar Year of the role an organization like AATI could play as an NGO versus your academic role? Because I'm asking you as an NGO, not as an academic. That's a different politics. Right? Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Well, we have an association for technology and innovation, started about 5 years ago. And our objective is to promote the technology innovations, and we work closely with Space Ungana and the Future Forum. And
We have a slight communication challenge here. We've had a power outage today. So David, you're back on. I'm saying we're about to close out for
Okay.
this session and take a. We're about to close out for lunch and take a break. We had a slight outage again a while ago. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it because I did to put this on the agenda. And as we kind of design our roadmap from where do we go from here tomorrow, we're going to spend some time about really how do we organize the wealth of information we have got to this. But I must tell you, your colleague is here from the embassy. So I'm sure he is happy to see that, yeah, you came and I told him you're going to be on. So we're hopeful that you two can also talk offline, see how you can help make this happen. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, David. We're going to take a break. We have
Thank you, Claire.
until to take a break and have lunch. Thank you. Bye-bye.
David, please, may you share your contact email address?
Yeah,
email me.
I'll send it to you. Not a problem.
Thank you so much.